Dork in Disguise, Chapter 5. As Jerry walked out of the cafeteria, someone threw an arm around his shoulder. "Hey, Jerry, what do you say?" It was Craig Fox. "Oh, hi," Jerry said. He wished Craig would go away. In fact, he never wanted to see Craig again for as long as he lived. That would be impossible, of course, because Craig was his locker partner. Craig turned around and said, "Hey, guys, this is Jerry Flack, the guy I told you about." Jerry turned to see who Craig was talking to and nearly choked. It was Gabe Marshall himself. Gabe nodded to him. "Jerry's cool," Craig said. Gabe grinned. "Fox's been talking about how you guys started the school year off with a bang." Jerry tried to smile. "Oh, yeah. This was amazing." All the kids in Jerry's old school had called him a dork. It was a unanimous opinion. Once at the end of 5th grade, Jerry had been standing in the hall with his best friend Drew Hepner and 2 other guys that Jerry hung around with. The most popular girl in school walked with 3 of her friends. She pointed to Jerry and the others and called out, "Oh, look, it must be a dork convention." Her friends shrieked with laughter. It was the ultimate humiliation. Jerry knew that his family was moving, and was at that moment he decided he was going to change his image. He wasn't going through another horrible year as one of the dorks. And now here he was, just 4 short months later, walking down the hall of his new school with Gabe, the coolest guy in his class. And Craig had just described Jerry as cool. If only the kids at his old school could see him now. Craig pointed to another boy who stood with them. He was the kid Jerry had seen Gabe with several times. "This is Tony." "Hi, Jerry." "Hi," Jerry said. "How are you doing?" Tony murmured. "Great." "You rollerblade, Flack?" Gabe asked. "With who, me?" Jerry asked. Sure, I rollerblade all the time. Rollerblading's my favorite thing to do." "We'll go sometime," Gabe said. "Great. See you, Flack." Craig said. "I'll touch base with you guys later," Jerry said. He was proud that he'd pulled that baseball metaphor out of thin air. The guys made a right turn and kept walking down the hall. Jerry, stunned at the attention, kept walking and climbed the stairs. There was a tap on his shoulder. "Hi," Brenda said. She walked along beside him. "I saw you walking with Gabe and company. Pretty impressive." "Yeah, I used a baseball metaphor, and they invited me to go rollerblading sometime." "Do you know how?" "Yeah, well, I'm not very good." "Have you ever been on skates during this lifetime?" "Not exactly." "That's what I thought," she said. "What are you going to do when Gabe wants to go rollerblading?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll learn how to skate." He turned to Brenda. "Didn't you say you went to Hemingway Elementary?" Brenda nodded. "Do you know Craig Fox?" "Yeah," she said. "He was on the edge of the popular crowd at Hemingway and works hard at being cool. He's also a jerk. One time in 4th grade, he pushed a 1st grader into a locker and closed the door. It locked, and our teacher had to call the janitor to get him out. Meanwhile, the kid was screaming his head off. Craig was suspended for a week, and he had to visit the school counselor twice a week for the rest of the semester. He thought it was pretty funny." "Looks like he's buddies with Gabe and Tony," Jerry said. Brenda nodded. "I think Gabe and Craig live across the street from each other. They've been friends for a long time." That explains it. "Well, Flack, I hope for your sake they never ask you to go rollerblading," Brenda said, turning away. "I've got to stop at my locker first, but I'll see you in science class." "Yeah, see ya." Jerry knew Brenda was right. He shouldn't have lied to the guys about being able to rollerblade, but if he told them the truth, they would have thought he was a dork. It was obvious to him already that pulling off this cool guy thing was going to be tricky. He wanted to hang out with Gabe and his friends, but he wanted to stay away from Craig. If he could convince Gabe and Cinnamon for even a couple of weeks that he was really cool, it would be the best couple weeks of his lives. He started to whistle and headed down the hall, but he realized what he was doing and closed his mouth. Cool guys probably don't whistle on their way to class. Jerry stood next to the counter and ran under the rows of the windows in his science class. The minute he'd walked in the day before, he'd known that this would be his favorite class. The whole room was filled with fascinating stuff. Hanging on the far wall was a huge periodic table of elements. He knew what it was, even though he couldn't see it well enough to make out the individual elements listed. He didn't have to see them, though. He knew the chart by heart, all the elements and their symbols. Under the chart was a sink, and then next to that was an aquarium filled with guppies and angelfish and neon tetras. Jerry walked along the counter, marveling at everything he saw. There were books about weather and rocks and minerals and plants. There was a bank of computers along another wall, and a TV monitor overhead, a CD laser scanner, a microscopes, and magnifying glasses, a Bunsen burner, test tubes, and petri dishes. A robin's nest sat on one shelf, and a Baltimore Oriole's nest sat on another. A hornet's nest hung from the ceiling in one corner, and a tiny hummingbird's nest sat on the shelf next to the teacher's desk. To Jerry, this room was better than Disney World. Great America and oceans of fun all rolled into one. He was glad Cinnamon wasn't in this class, or Gabe, or Robin. He thought he spotted a familiar face and squinted to see better. Yep, Tony was in this class. He'd have to be careful in here, or Tony might tell Gabe that Jerry was a science nerd. A blurry Brenda walked into the room and waved at him. She said hi to half a dozen kids as she made her way to her seat. She sat with Kim Henley on one side and Kat Henley on the other. Jerry couldn't see well enough to make out which one was which. Mr. Hooten talked about things they would study this year: plants, animals, rocks, and minerals. It all sounded interesting. But when Mr. Hooten suggested that students could earn extra credit by doing projects on their own and keeping a science journal, Jerry leaned forward to hear every word. He was already doing those things. Now he could talk to a real scientist, Mr. Hooten, about his experiments and get extra credit. 2. Not that he needed the extra credit in science. It was his best subject. This is going to be a fun class, Brenda said after the period ended. The Henley sisters and 2 others, a blonde girl and a dark-haired kid, stood next to her. Hey, have you met Chad Newsom? Brenda asked, and this is Audrey Lane. The blonde bobbed her head at Jerry. Guys, this is Jerry Flack. Hi, they all said. The 5 of us hung out a lot this summer, Brenda said, grinning. I guess the last time I saw these guys all together was at Sal's Pizza. The twins are maniacs over triple cheese. Kim, the one with the mole beauty mark, rolled her eyes. Don't call us the twins, she said. We're individuals, said Kat. Don't even call us the Henley sisters, said Kim. Call us by our names, said Kat. Sorry, Brenda said. I forgot. Remember? Kim turned to Jerry. I'm Kim. I have the beauty mark. It's really a mole, Kat said, but if you insist. I have to stop by my locker, Jerry interrupted, not wanting to hear the argument again. See you in computer class, Kim and Kat said in unison. Yeah, see you, Chad said. I'm in your class, too. Me, too. In fact, I'm in most of your classes, Aubrey said with a smile. Jerry had thought these 2 were in more than just his science class, but because most faces were pretty blurry, he hadn't been sure. Bye, Brenda called out. Jerry hurried to his locker at the end of the hall. He worked the combination lock and opened it. He stared at what he saw. It was only the second day of school, and already the locker was a mess. Craig had thrown his books into it, so they stood sideways or upside down. One was partially open with a dirty running shoe crammed inside, creasing some of the solid pages. The mess took over the entire locker. No wonder Craig hadn't cared which shelf was his. It didn't matter. He'd used both of them. Jerry cleared off the top shelf and pushed Craig's stuff onto the second shelf. Then he organized the top shelf with books from his morning classes. He took a second look at it. It didn't look like the shelf of a cool guy. He ripped out a blank piece of notebook paper, crumpled it, and jammed it into a space on the shelf. That was more like it. It looked messier now. That would have to do for the time being. Later, he could figure out other ways to mess up his shelf, but still keep it reasonably organized. He shut the locker and headed to the computer class, feeling pretty good. His disguise was working well today. After all, the cool guys had asked him to go rollerblading. As long as he didn't have to actually skate, things just might work out.